I was 67 years old the morning I sat in my financial advisor's office and watched his face go pale. He had been my advisor for 11 years. In all that time, I had never seen him look at me the way he looked at me that Tuesday morning in March, like he was searching for the kindest possible way to deliver the worst possible news. He turned his monitor slowly toward me, and I leaned forward in my chair, and for a long moment I simply did not understand what I was looking at. Then I did, and my hands went cold. $81,000. Gone. Not all at once. That was the part that made my stomach turn. It had happened slowly, quietly, in amounts small enough that I might never have noticed. 400 here, 800 there, sometimes a few thousand, always on days when I was tired or distracted or not feeling well. 11 months of careful, patient, deliberate theft. From my own savings account. From the account I had spent 34 years building, working double shifts at the hospital, skipping vacations, clipping coupons in my 60s so that I would never have to ask anyone for anything. I thought about the past year. I thought about all the times I had felt foggy and exhausted for no reason I could explain. I thought about the headaches, the vertigo, the strange forgetfulness that I had quietly written off as aging. I thought about the pill organizer on my kitchen counter that I had trusted completely because I no longer had to think about it. Someone else had been filling it for me. I had trusted her completely. Let me back up. My son moved back home about 14 months ago. He is 38 years old, and I love him more than I love almost anything in this world, but he has never been particularly good at making decisions, and this one moving back into my house in Savannah with a woman he had known for 4 months, ranked somewhere near the bottom of his personal highlight reel. I did not say that to him. He is my son. I said, "Of course, stay as long as you need. The guest room is already made up. I am happy to have the company." His girlfriend arrived with 3 suitcases and a very practiced smile. She was 34, pretty in a careful, deliberate way. She called me by my first name from the first day, which I found a little odd, but I told myself I was being old-fashioned. She complimented my house constantly, asked questions about the neighborhood property values within the first week, and offered very sweetly, very generously, to help me manage my medications, since she had worked as a home health aide for several years and knew how confusing it could be to keep track of everything. I should have said no, but I was tired, and she seemed so capable, and my son looked so happy, and I told myself I was being paranoid. That word, paranoid. I would say it to myself over and over in the months that followed, every time something felt wrong, every time I noticed something I couldn't quite explain. I used it like a hammer to knock down my own instincts, and I am not sure I will ever fully forgive myself for that. The first thing I noticed was the fatigue. I have never been a sleepy person. I raised my son mostly alone after his father left. I worked 30 years in labor and delivery. I coached a rec league softball team until I was 59. I do not nap. I do not fade. But about 3 weeks after my son's girlfriend moved in, I started fading. Some mornings I could barely make it to the kitchen table before I needed to sit down. I was dizzy in the afternoons. I slept 10, 11 hours a night and woke up feeling worse than when I had gone to bed. My doctor ran blood work. Everything came back within normal range. She said it was probably stress, possibly the beginning stages of something we'd want to watch, and we scheduled a follow-up for 3 months out. I went home and took the pills my son's girlfriend had sorted into my pill organizer because that was part of our routine now, and I was too tired to question it. I want to pause here and say something to anyone watching this who is in their 60s or 70s or beyond. Please, please, please never let anyone else manage your medications unless you have personally verified every single thing they are giving you. I know how it sounds. I know it sounds extreme, but I am standing on the other side of what I am about to tell you, and I am telling you, it is not extreme. It is the most important thing I can say. The money started in late spring. I didn't know it at the time, of course. I was too tired to look at my bank statements with any real attention. My son's girlfriend had offered early on to help me set up automatic bill pay. All very helpful, very organized. She sat beside me at the computer and walked me through everything, and I thought, how lucky my son is to have found someone so competent. She was on my account as an authorized user by June. I had added her myself. She'd explained that it would make it easier to handle any billing issues that came up while I wasn't feeling well. She was right. It did make it easier. It made everything easier for her. The fog began to lift partially, temporarily in August, when my oldest friend came to visit from Charleston. She has known me for 40 years. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, looked at my face, and said, "What is wrong with you? You look like a ghost." I told her I hadn't been sleeping well. I told her I'd been a little under the weather. She watched me struggle to remember the name of a restaurant we'd been going to together for 20 years, and something shifted behind her eyes. After my son and his girlfriend left to run errands that afternoon, she sat beside me on the porch and said, very carefully, "How often are you alone?" I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized the answer was almost never. One or both of them was almost always home. My son's girlfriend worked remotely from my dining room table, and she was there every single day. She drove me to most of my appointments. She answered the door when neighbors came by. She was always present, always nearby, always helpful, always there. My friend did not say anything dramatic. She just squeezed my hand and said, "Trust yourself, okay? You're the sharpest woman I know. Trust yourself." She went back to Charleston 2 days later. But something had shifted in me. I started paying attention differently. Not dramatically, I was careful about that, because something told me that if I changed my behavior too suddenly, I would tip my hand before I understood what game was being played. I started writing things down, little things. The times I felt most foggy versus the times I felt clearer. What I had eaten, what I had taken. I noticed that on the days my son's girlfriend was out of the house for long stretches, the occasional afternoon she went to the gym, the rare evenings she and my son went out for dinner, I felt better. Noticeably better. Clearer. More like myself. I started, very carefully, not taking everything in my pill organizer. I would take the pills I recognized and had taken for years. The ones that looked unfamiliar, the ones I couldn't immediately identify, I would set aside. I told no one. I started feeling better within 2 weeks. I need you to understand something about what that realization felt like. It was not like in a movie where the music swells and everything becomes clear and righteous and energizing. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under my life. Because if the pills were wrong, if what was in that organizer was not what I thought it was, then the person who filled it had done that deliberately. And the person who filled it was living in my house, sleeping down the hall from me, eating at my table, touching my things. The person who filled it was my son's girlfriend, and my son was in love with her. I could not go to my son. Not yet. I had no proof. I had only a feeling, and I knew how it would land. An aging mother, jealous of her son's girlfriend, imagining things. I had watched women be dismissed that way my entire career. I was not going to dismiss myself. I called my friend in Charleston. I told her what I had pieced together. There was a long silence, and then she said, "You need a camera." I had not thought about it in exactly those terms, but the moment she said it, I knew she was right. I needed to see what was happening in my own home when I was asleep, or in another room, or too foggy to notice. I needed proof that existed outside of my own memory, which I had started to distrust because that is what months of cognitive impairment does to you. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you wonder if you are the problem. I ordered a small camera online. It arrived in a plain box, which I intercepted from the mailbox myself on a morning when my son's girlfriend was in the shower. I set it up in the kitchen, on the shelf above the coffee maker, pointed toward the counter where she prepared my morning tea and where my pill organizer sat every day. It looked like a small decorative clock. She never glanced at it twice. Then I waited. I did not have to wait long. On the 4th morning after I installed the camera, my son left early for work. His girlfriend came downstairs around 8, and I was sitting in the living room pretending to read. She went into the kitchen. I heard the familiar sounds, the kettle, the cabinet doors, the clink of the mug. After about 10 minutes, she brought me my tea and my morning pills with a warm smile, asked if I'd slept well, told me she was going to do some work in the dining room, and disappeared. That evening, when the house was quiet, I sat at my computer and pulled up the camera footage. I watched her make my tea. I watched her reach into the pocket of her robe. I watched her open a small amber prescription bottle, not one of mine, not anything I had ever seen before, and tap something into my mug. 2 small pills. She stirred the tea. She put the bottle back in her pocket. She picked up the mug, smiled at her own reflection in the window above the sink, and walked toward the living room. I watched that footage 4 times. I did not cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. What I felt was something I don't have a perfect word for, a kind of cold, terrible clarity, like stepping outside in January, like every soft, forgiving, mother-shaped instinct in me had suddenly and completely stopped. I downloaded the video to my phone, emailed it to myself, and sent a copy to my friend in Charleston with the message, I wasn't paranoid. The next morning, I had an appointment with my doctor, one I had made myself, from my cell phone, without telling anyone in the house. I had told my son's girlfriend that a neighbor was driving me. In the car, alone, I played the video for my doctor on my phone. She watched it twice without saying anything. Then she looked at me and said, We need to run a full toxicology panel. And you need to call someone you trust to help you figure out your next steps. The toxicology results took a few days. While I waited, I did the thing I had been putting off. I called my financial advisor to schedule a regular annual review. I have one every spring, so there was nothing unusual about it. I sat across from him in his office. He turned his monitor toward me. $81,000. I did not cry then either. I asked him to print everything, every transaction, every date. He printed 47 pages. He asked me, very gently, if there was something he should know. I told him I was still putting things together and that I would call him very soon. I folded those pages and put them in my purse, and I drove myself home, and I walked in the front door, and my son's girlfriend was in the kitchen making lunch, and she asked how my appointment went. And I said, Fine, just the usual checkup. Everything looks good. And I smiled. That was the hardest smile of my life. My doctor called 3 days later. The panel had found elevated levels of a benzodiazepine, a sedative that had not been prescribed to me by any physician, consistent with long-term low-dose exposure, consistent with the fatigue, the cognitive fog, the dizziness, consistent with months of someone putting a sedative into my food or drink or medications without my knowledge. I hung up the phone. I sat down in my bedroom with the door closed, and then, for the first time in this entire ordeal, I allowed myself to cry. Not for long, but I needed to, and I did, and then I stopped. I had a decision to make, and I made it. I called my son. I need to tell you that this was the part of all of this that I had dreaded most. More than the camera footage, more than the bank statements, more than the toxicology results. My son is not a bad person. He is a credulous person, a trusting person, a person who has spent his adult life wanting to believe the best of everyone around him, which is a beautiful quality and also a dangerous one. I did not know how he would respond. I did not know if he would believe me. I had packed a small bag and made a reservation at a hotel, just in case. I called him at work. I asked him to come home for lunch, that I needed to talk to him about something important and I would prefer to do it in person. He heard something in my voice and arrived within 20 minutes. I sat him down at the kitchen table. His girlfriend was out. She had gone to a yoga class, which I had known she would, because I had quietly started tracking her schedule. I put my phone on the table between us and I played the video. I did not say anything. I let him watch. He watched it once. Then he put his elbows on the table and pressed his face into his hands, and I sat across from him and I waited. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. How long? He asked. I told him what I knew. The timeline from the toxicology results. The bank statements. 47 pages. I put them on the table in front of him one by one, and I watched my son age 10 years in about 15 minutes. He kept saying her name, kept saying it like a question, like he was trying to reconcile the name with what he was looking at, and couldn't. At some point he said, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" And I looked at my son, this man I love, and I said, "Because I needed to know before I told you. Because I needed you to be able to see it and not doubt it. Because you deserve the truth, not just my word against hers." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do we do?" I had already spoken to a lawyer, 2 days earlier, while his girlfriend was at the gym. The lawyer had been clear. Gather everything, preserve everything, contact law enforcement with documentation in hand. Do not confront. Do not give her the opportunity to destroy evidence or leave the state. My son called in the rest of the day from work. We drove to the police station together. We sat in a small room with a detective, and I put the camera footage, the toxicology report, the bank statements, and the records from my financial advisor on the table. The detective looked through everything slowly and thoroughly, and then she looked at me and said, "This is a strong case, ma'am. We're going to take this seriously." We went home. His girlfriend's car was back in the driveway. My son went inside first. I waited on the porch. I heard the conversation, not every word, but the shape of it. Her voice went up, then sharp, then very quiet. My son came back to the door and nodded at me. I walked inside. She was standing in the living room. She looked at me, and I watched her understand, in real time, that the woman she had spent 14 months managing and sedating and stealing from had just walked back in through her own front door with the full weight of everything behind her. Whatever she had thought of me, it had not included this. She said, "I was going to pay it back." My son said nothing. I said nothing. She said, we needed the money. We were going to need a place to live eventually, and I just thought." She stopped. She looked at the floor, and then she said something I have turned over in my mind many times since. She said, "You have so much. You don't even know what you have." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about 34 years of double shifts. I thought about the vacations I did not take, and the things I did not buy, and the retirement I had built dollar by dollar so that I would be secure. I thought about waking up every morning for 11 months feeling like I was disappearing from the inside out. I thought about my son's face at the kitchen table. I said, "I know exactly what I have, and it's mine." The police came within the hour. She did not go quietly, but she went. My son's girlfriend was charged with elder financial abuse, theft over $10,000, and criminal administration of a controlled substance without consent, which is a felony. Her case went to trial 7 months later. I sat in that courtroom every single day. I watched the prosecutor play the camera footage on a screen large enough for the entire room to see. I watched the jury watch it. I watched her face when they came back. She was convicted on all counts. She was sentenced to 12 years. 12 years is a long time. Long enough, I hope, to think carefully about what she chose to do and who she chose to do it to. Long enough for me to rebuild what she took and to feel safe in my own home again. My son moved out a few months after the arrest. Not because I asked him to, I never would have asked that, but he needed space to process his own grief over what had happened, over who he had believed she was, and I understood that. He bought a small house about 20 minutes away. He comes for dinner on Sundays. We are okay. We are going to be okay. I have my home security system now, proper cameras, front door, back door, kitchen, living room. I have direct access to all of my accounts, and I review them myself every 2 weeks without exception. I handle my own medications, and nobody touches them but me. My financial advisor calls me personally every quarter. These are not dramatic changes. They are just the things I should have had in place from the beginning, before I let myself believe that being helped was the same as being safe. I want to say one more thing before I go, because I think it is the most important thing. There is a particular kind of harm that happens to older women, and it is not always violent, and it does not always look like what you imagine when you hear the word harm. Sometimes it looks like someone offering to help you. Sometimes it looks like convenience and care, and someone making your life a little easier when you are tired. Sometimes the people who mean to take everything from you arrive with a warm smile and a willingness to carry the groceries, and by the time you understand what is happening, they have made themselves so embedded in your daily life that the very idea of questioning them feels ungrateful. Trust yourself, please. If something feels wrong, it is not aging. It is not confusion. It is not paranoia. Your instincts were built over 6 or 7 decades of living, and they are among the most reliable things you own. Use them. Write things down. Talk to someone you trusted before the situation started. A friend, a sibling, an old colleague, someone with no stake in the story. Get a second pair of eyes. And if someone else is filling your pill organizer, empty it tonight and start over yourself. I am 68 years old now. My hair has grown back. The fog is completely gone. I sleep 7 hours and wake up feeling like myself, which is something I had stopped noticing I was missing until I had it back. I walk 2 miles every morning around my neighborhood, and I drink my coffee on the porch, and I look at the yard I have maintained for 22 years and I think, this is mine. All of this is still mine. She did not get my house. She did not get my money. Most of it has been recovered through civil restitution proceedings, and I expect to see the rest in the years ahead. She did not get my son. She did not get my health or my mind or my sense of myself. She got 12 years in a Georgia State Correctional Facility, and she earned every single one of them. I am grateful for my friend, who looked at me across my own kitchen table and asked the right question. I am grateful for my doctor, who took me seriously. I am grateful for the detective who looked at 47 pages of bank statements and told me this was a strong case. I am grateful for every person in my life who treated my instincts as valid information rather than an old woman's nerves. And I am grateful for myself. For finally, after too many months of calling it paranoia, listening to the part of me that knew. If you have someone in your life who is elderly, who lives with a partner or caregiver you don't know well, please check in on them. Not just a phone call, go and see them, sit with them, look at their face. Ask the quiet questions. You might be the person who makes the difference. And if you are watching this, and something I said landed close to home, if some part of this story felt familiar in a way that made your chest tight, please do not wait as long as I did. You are not paranoid. You are not imagining it. You are not confused. You are paying attention. That is exactly what you should be doing.